And welcome to Nostalgia's Perspective, a podcast where two friends look back on the media which has influenced us. I'm Georgia.
I'm Jay, and this week we're talking about H2O, Just Add Water, which is a TV show which Georgia watched when she was younger. So Georgia, why don't you tell us why we're talking about it and a little bit about what it is essentially.
I can't believe that I made you watch this. I'm still a bit oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think this is going to be an interesting one because so far we've only looked back on things that we still considered good.
Right.
Even though we were critical of 500 Days of Summer or Jane Eyre, we still considered that a good movie and that a good book.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be interesting to look back on something that I am definitely nostalgic about, but I don't consider good.
Right. Okay.
I want everyone to hear that. I'm not saying that H2O deserved an Emmy or anything. It just has a bit of nostalgia for me.
Yeah. Did it win any Kids' Choice Awards or anything?
Do you know what? I don't know. I'm going to look that up.
I doubt it because it's Australian.
It was on Nickelodeon.
Well, yeah, true, I guess. Yeah.
H2O, Just Add Water. It'll have a Wikipedia page. Awards and nominations. It was nominated for Kids' Choice Awards.
Ooh.
And it won the second year.
So it did win a Kids' Choice Award?
It did.
Which is the Emmys of children's TV. So
yeah.
So you're criticising it, but it won the Emmy essentially.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Anyway.
See, critically acclaimed. Actually, I think it's fan voted, isn't it? But
Yeah. Okay, so why did I pick H2O? Why did I pick H2O?
I can kind of answer that.
Go for it.
Because we tried a couple of other things, or we were going to do a couple of other things, and then you weren't that keen on them.
I think that one of the benefits to looking back on a show that you watched as a kid,
yeah,
and that you haven't watched recently is these days I'm so critical of TV.
Right.
It was very hard for me to find a TV show that I was happy with you watching because I'm not always 100% happy with TV shows.
Right.
The way that I can be 100% happy with books or films. I'm not too sure what it is. I always see the endings of TV shows as very much paramount to how I feel about them. And if a TV show has a bad ending, it will be very unlikely that I rewatch that.
Yeah. So
some things that we considered was Pretty Little Liars, which after its ending, I cannot rewatch.
Right.
For the life of me.
Yeah.
I did suggest Full Metal Alchemist, but it was quite long and something quite difficult to get into.
Right, yeah.
Other TV shows that I enjoy haven't finished, and I feel as though we shouldn't talk about them until they finish. And so, yeah, it was very difficult for me to pick something. But H2O came out when I was in year 5, and I can remember the adverts coming out on the TV when it first began, and I remember that it started, the first episode piloted at 4:30 on a Wednesday, and I can remember looking at the clock sat in my year 5 classroom I really want to get home and I really want to watch that show. And so there was a specific day of the week where I used to just run home and watch it with my sister, and me and my younger sister are 6 years apart, so just as I was kind of getting out of kids' TV shows, she was getting into it.
Yeah.
And she's just a bit bossier than me. Like, I feel free to say that. And so the TV often ended up in her choice.
Right.
And so if I was going to watch TV, it was going to be kids shows. And so I continued to enjoy H2O as she got into it. And it was something that we really loved together as kids. And then as teenagers, we loved rewatching the TV shows and movies that we watched as kids, and then laughing at them. Me and Alexandra have a real humor that I know a lot of people in our family don't get, of what, like, purposefully watching bad TV shows and movies and finding immense joy in them.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the reasons that I can, even though it's not great, even though I can watch it better than I can watch something like Pretty Little Liars.
Yeah.
Because I can laugh at its clunkiness.
Yeah.
While when I try to watch something that was meant to be, or at least was kind of made to be good, and was made to be appreciated by people older, and it's bad, I just find it so cringeworthy.
Yeah, because children's TV, whatever the show is, will always have that quality of the, like, overacting, bad acting, not amazing writing. Like, it'll always have a sense of that, however good the show is as a children's show. And so you can let it off for having that, whereas anything made for adults, or even, like, teenagers, like older teenagers, which I'd say probably Pretty Little Liars, that's the target audience. It should be better than that.
Yeah, and I think that H2O in particular, looking back on it, I can look back on it in a fairly generous way.
Yeah.
When I've rewatched things like, when I've seen episodes of things that were on at a similar time, like Victorious or Hannah Montana, I think started at a similar time.
Right.
Wizards of Waverly Place, all of them, they are very they don't have the same plot thread that H2O does.
Yes.
Like, H2O definitely has a story. It's not so much like, here's a premise, you know, wizards living in New York, or a girl that's both a pop star and a regular high schooler, let's run with it.
Yeah.
Like, it definitely has a kind of overarching plot.
Yeah.
Which is one of those things where if you could take the plot on a piece of paper, you could probably manipulate it to make it something older, but it works in its kind of kids' TV show format. So I think that's why I've picked it over and above any other kids' TV shows I was watching at the time, because there are still parts of it that when I'm rewatching it, I'm like, oh, that's actually a vaguely, like, that's an interesting premise.
Right. What comes to mind there, out of interest?
One of the things for me is this kind of, and it's something I've got written down to discuss later on.
Oh, okay.
But I think Charlotte is a really interesting antagonist.
Okay.
And the kind of themes that she kind of brings about, I don't know, I'm going to put a pin in it.
Okay.
Okay. To discuss.
Yeah.
But first time watching it, what were your thoughts, apart from, oh my god, these accents are so bad?
The accents aren't bad.
Cleo!
The accents are fine. They're
Emma!
just Australian.
Emma, the condensation! Oh my god.
You're just being racist now. No, the accents are fine. Okay, so it's very difficult to watch a children's show for the first time as a 24-year-old.
Yes.
Not only that, but, and I say this with a grain of salt because gender is stupid, but this is not only a children's show I'm watching as an adult, it's a children's show aimed at girls that I'm watching as a 24-year-old man. And so I'm not the target audience. And that has to be borne in mind, I would not be watching this if I weren't watching it for the podcast. But in terms of looking at it as a children's show, I think it's decent. Like, and I think a lot of that does come down to what you've said about it has an arc. It has a series arc. It has a larger plot than just, here's a premise, let's do a new kind of situation each week. It's more than that. It has... I think saying that it has, like, a mythos is a little generous, but it does, essentially. They do build a world for it. Like, they have their rules in the world, as ridiculous as they are. And, yeah, I think it works as a children's TV show pretty well. Like, I did other things while I was watching it, and this is maybe the point to say as well that you wrote out a list of episodes to watch from the first 2 seasons. So I watched, all in all, about half of each of season 1 and season 2. I didn't watch all of it.
Yeah, I'd like to point out for anybody who maybe there are some H2O fans out there that both me and my sister, with extensive knowledge of H2O, combed through the episodes and decided what was relevant and what was not relevant.
Yeah.
So don't worry, he didn't miss anything important.
Yeah, you did a pretty good job. The only thing that I missed was Ash's introduction.
There was a big debate on that because the only episode he's in prior to the one that was listed was one where it was a random horse riding episode.
Sure.
And he happens to work at the stables.
Right.
And then the next thing you see of him, he's suddenly working at the juice bar with Emma. And so me and my sister decided, I'd originally put it down, and then me and my sister decided that his reintroduction was so random, even if you'd seen the horse riding episode, that it really made no difference whether you saw it or didn't.
Right, okay, that's interesting to me for when we talk about Ash. But yeah, no. So I didn't watch everything, but I got the gist. I watched the stuff that you said was most important, and yeah, it was decent. It was decent. It was watchable, is the point I was trying to make. Like, as much as I was doing other stuff while I was watching it, it wasn't so much like, oh god, I want this to be over now.
Oh, and also another side note, I didn't get him to watch season 3 because season 3 is ludicrous. Okay, so first thing I want to discuss is what I believe that there's 2 overall themes to the show.
Right, okay. And
they're attached. I kind of want to see what you think of them in terms of whether you think these are 2 separate themes or whether you think they are the same theme.
Sure.
But I've put the first one as accepting change, differences, and unpredictability.
Yeah.
The girls kind of start off with this kind of like ordinary life, and then they have to learn how to accept like a very big change in like their life just being completely chaotic and unpredictable, etc. And then the second theme is magic versus science, fate versus control, that sort of theme.
Right.
Any initial thoughts on that?
So I think in terms of, you ask if I think they're different. I think they are different because I think the first one is why it's a children's TV show.
Yes.
Because the kind of note that I've put down is classic puberty metaphor.
Yes.
Like, you're a teenager, things change, your body changes, that sort of thing.
God, that phrase just makes me cringe so hard.
Oh, definitely. But it is a thing. It is a very obvious, like, we're drawing parallels here.
Mm.
Whereas the second theme, the kind of magic versus science, I'd say it's a sub-theme, if that's a thing. As in, it's never the main driving force of the story. I don't think. It's Lewis's storyline. But it's not the girls' storyline.
Yeah.
It's not what the girls are ever focused on. And so, I don't know where I sit with that, really. In that, I see it there, I don't think it's the focus. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I forgot to ask, who was your favourite and least favourite character?
Right, yes, because you asked me this off podcast after I'd finished season 1. And I said Lewis. I think
Good choice.
I think I think Lewis is my favourite character in season 1. I think season 2 is more difficult because I don't love the Lewis and Cleo storyline. And I think in season 2 it's maybe Emma or Zane. Weirdly enough, like, I think that Zane is just a generally nice guy in the episodes I've watched in season 2.
Yeah.
And possibly the most mature of them, which is a surprise, obviously. But I don't know. Zane is a pretty well fleshed out character, I think, as well, and has more nuance to him than some of the characters, and I like that.
I really quite like the episode where they're searching for the statue.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks the worst of Zane. And everyone thinks that they're like that he's pushing Ricky to do something and that it's all for his own gain.
Right.
When in actuality it's her that wants to do it more than him.
Yeah.
And that in the end he's actually just more concerned for Ricky's well-being than he is for like any sort of monetary gain or anything like that.
Well, yeah, he is just an alright guy.
Yeah, he's just a decent bloke by the end of it, really.
Yeah, pretty much. In terms of least favourite, Cleo annoys me.
Really?
Yeah, all of them annoy me at their moments, but I find Cleo is the one who is most often making the dumb decisions. And just being a little bit stupid. Like, don't get me wrong, they all do it, but I think Cleo more than most.
Okay, well, let's start with Cleo then, because I think that Cleo is, although it's the three of them, I think that Cleo is meant to be the protagonist.
Yeah, she's the one swimming in the middle.
Yes. She's the one swimming in the middle. She's the one who, because of her relationship with Lewis, she's got the main, like, romantic subplot.
Yeah, especially in season 2. It's the main plot.
Yeah. I think that Cleo, for all her annoyingness, does have quite significant character growth throughout. Like, she starts off, like, stupidly scared about everything.
Yeah.
And then she does end up running away. Like, that is the end of season 2, is her, like, running away from her problems. But she does...
just doesn't want to wash the dishes, Dad.
And there's the zoom in on the dishes as she's like, oh my god.
Yeah, I just wanted her to like break the pipe or something. Like, come on. Bit of creativity. Use your powers.
I mean, I'd just I don't know what I'd do in that situation.
I feel like there is a way. I mean, like, okay, so my thought or my idea, I'm sure she couldn't execute it, but my idea was create a bubble of air around your hands and then wash the dishes up. Which is maybe a bit difficult. But, sorry, complete sidetrack.
No, and you know what? Now I'm rethinking about it. She worked in the dolphin park, and during that entire time, she would use gloves. And so she was perfectly fine with using gloves in order to, like, get fish to feed the dolphins.
Yeah.
But not to wash the dishes.
Oh, yeah, no, there is a line. She says, "Where are the gloves?" And her dad says, "You don't need gloves, just wash the dishes." So they do address that. Give them credit where it's due. They do address that.
Such a dad line. Like... Oh, but she does go from being the one who is the most resistant to being a mermaid
Yeah.
to the one who kind of, I think, cares for it the most or relies on it the most. I don't know why. I always got the sense in season 2 that she needed it more than the other girls did.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there is a storyline that they tried to put in there of her being the most conflicted, because obviously there's the parallel between her and Max's girlfriend, whose name I can't remember.
Grace.
Is it Gracie?
Gracie,
yeah, Gracie, yeah. Between her and Gracie couldn't deal with like the dual life kind of thing. And so they tried to draw that parallel. I didn't really see it, but you know it better than I do. So
yeah, I mean, it's one of the frustrating things about kids shows like this is like seeing like, I always find it very frustrating when I can see storylines that are there that just haven't been fully developed.
Yeah.
So why didn't you like the Cleo Lewis storyline?
I felt like in the first and second episode of season 2, or taking it back a little bit, going into season 2, the end of season 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
I reckon they made season 1 not knowing if they had a season 2. And so they got them together at the end of season 1 because that is the story arc. That, like, they were friends who, like, wanted to be together, but neither of them kind of admitted that. But then they eventually did and they got together. That was their story arc. But then they got a second season. And so they didn't want to just keep them together. They wanted to keep that story arc going, I guess. And so in the first couple of episodes, they made Lewis overbearing. And they made Cleo not want to address it, just to break them up, basically. So that frustrated me. Because that's like, oh no, it just felt a bit lazy. It comes as well from the fact of them reusing storylines a bit. Like, they just wanted to milk that a bit more. And then it's also their love story, if you want to call it that. Their, like, romance was kind of in the background in season 1. It was there throughout season 1. It was a storyline. But it wasn't the main storyline, it wasn't the main focus. The main focus was the girls, and them kind of coming to terms with their powers and being friends and stuff like that. Whereas in season 2, the main storyline is her and Lewis.
Yeah. And
I think they made season 2 much more about the romance than season 1 was.
Yeah.
And they gave Lewis a new girlfriend who's the antagonist, and I don't know. I just think that's a less interesting story, making it a romance. I just think it's less interesting. Just have a show with 3 friends, like, discovering their powers and dealing with issues and stuff like that. I think that's more interesting. And letting them have a male friend is also quite nice. Like, while that story was like a love story between Cleo and Lewis, it was also one of those love stories where it was never really about attraction. It was more about they're great friends, and so they kind of fall for each other just because they're good friends. I think that's nicer than, oh no, it became more about being a love story and being lovey-dovey, and I just didn't buy that as much. I also think it made Lewis's character worse. They sacrificed Lewis's character for that storyline a little bit, and I don't like that because I liked Lewis.
I mean, I think he stays pretty true to who he is.
He does in the second half of the season. He does towards the end.
I felt sorry for him in the first half of the season, where he's kind of been shafted a bit to the side, and he's kind of trying to balance between having other relationships and still remaining loyal to the 3 girls.
Yeah.
So I do feel sorry for him on that part, because it just became impossible.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I think he suffers a little bit from, like, don't be an idiot in the second half, where Charlotte is clearly, like, doing some underhanded stuff.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh, no, it's nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine. I always question, after the episode with his birthday, when he goes off on the party boat,
why is he still with her?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Like, do they not say to him, like, hey, she locked us into a room and, like, forced us to become mermaids? But, like, no, apparently we, like, just skip that conversation entirely. The line where he breaks up with Charlotte, or that she says something like, are you breaking up with me? And he's like, absolutely. Like, me and my sister always just clap at that line because it is like... Yes, go, like...
Duh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind the love story element, but I think that's just because I'm a bit of a sucker for love stories.
Yeah.
I don't know. I related to Cleo a lot as well. Like, I was such like... I think I was just related to Cleo in the sense that she was just always so... God bless her. Like, I think in the second season, she makes a bit of a wrong-footed movement by breaking up with Lewis. And then after that, like, things just keep going downhill for her. Her parents get divorced, and then Charlotte comes along, and Charlotte's a dick to her, and I don't know, like, it's just one thing after the other. And I'm like, feel sorry for your love.
Yeah. I would like to make the point, I don't think Charlotte's a dick to her initially. I think Charlotte in the middle of the season is fine. But mostly, I think she is justifiably concerned about Cleo still liking Lewis.
Yeah.
And how much Lewis still seems to like Cleo. I think she's reasonable about it in the middle of the season. And then she just goes full crazy.
Well, we'll get to Charlotte. But anyway, we'll kind of move on because two people who we've kind of sidelined, kind of like season 2 did.
I was going to say.
Was Emma and Ricky.
And
Emma and Ricky, I feel like their main role is to almost be antagonists to each other. Like, their whole kind of like identity is that they act completely differently. Cleo's kind of in the middle of them.
Yeah.
And conflict comes from the fact that they will never agree on, like, pretty much anything.
Yeah, I think, again, season 2 changed things a little bit. But yeah, I think that is kind of the point in that Emma is very prim and proper, isn't she? That is her thing. She's very, like, structure and organisation and stuff like that, and Ricky is meant to represent the edgier kind of the three, and I don't know, the badass of the three, I guess, isn't she? Is the point of her.
Yeah,
so I know what you mean there. I think, yeah, like you say, like in season 2 it just gets lost because we're focused too much on the Cleo storyline, and if we're focused on them, then we're focused on their relationships rather than on them. Because, I think partly as well, because we're fine by the end of season 1. They all get on, and they're fine at the end of season 1. So there's nowhere to go with that.
Yeah.
But I think I think I like Emma more in season 2 because she is less extreme than she is in season 1. Because I think in season 1 she's like over the top, super organised and stuff like that, which puts you off her a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the point, I think, a little bit. I think Emma is meant to be your least favourite character, or least favourite of the three. Like, there will be certain people who relate to her, but a lot of people, she would be their least favourite.
Yeah, I do find it odd with Emma. Like, I was thinking while rewatching it, I was like, are we supposed to like Emma?
Right.
Because you'd surely think, and this is the same with a lot of, I don't know if it's the same with things that are targeted towards male audiences,
Sure.
but in female audiences there's this tendency to do a who's who, you know, and you can get like anything from like kids TV shows to adults TV shows,
Yeah.
there's generally a group of women, group of female protagonists, and it's meant to be like, I'm this type, you're this type, my other friend is this type. I'm thinking Pretty Little Liars again, Sex and the City, Girls.
Well, yeah, you could say Friends, couldn't you?
Yes,
Emma
to a
is
certain
Monica.
extent. True.
I don't think it lines up perfectly, but you could kind of loosely say Emma is Monica, Cleo is Rachel, and Ricky is Phoebe.
Mm-hmm.
They don't line up perfectly, but it is that sort of thing, isn't it? Everyone kind of fits in a category.
Yeah. And so Emma's a weird one because she does soften. I did feel sorry for her, I think, with the idea of reaching the age of 15, 16, having been a competitive swimmer for your entire life,
right?
And then suddenly, without being able to discuss it with anybody else, you have to just stop that career entirely.
That is. Sorry, I cut you off.
Go on. No, go on, you go.
Yeah, that is. I didn't make many notes while watching it, but one of the only notes I made was in episode 2. I put the note, Emma quitting the swim team feels like it should be a bigger deal.
Yes.
Because that really is a massive change to, like you say, this is what she did. This is who she was, and suddenly she couldn't do it anymore. That felt like it should be a massive deal, and it gets brought up every now and then.
Yep.
But it feels like it should have an emotional impact on her. And I know it's a kids' show, which is maybe why it doesn't, but it really feels like it should have a bigger impact.
It really does, shouldn't it? And also, there's this kind of feeling throughout that Ricky has just her dad, who, you only see in one episode throughout the entire 2 seasons.
Oh, he's in a couple. He's in a couple.
Is he?
Yeah.
I can figure him one.
There's the one where we first meet him. And
yeah, with the motorcycle. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have Ricky there, Ricky's family there, and then Cleo's whole home life is supposed to be well-to-do, in terms of her house, but people are arguing all the time, and there's Kim and there's her father and all of this, and then Emma's family, by comparison, as far as I can tell, she's meant to be kind of perceived as the wealthiest of the 3.
Yeah.
And she's got, both her mum and her dad and her brother, and they all get along, and she really loves her mum and all of this. But in consideration to the fact that she's just, to their eyes, has just dropped her entire passion and career out of the blue and hasn't described it, they don't really, in perspective, give much of a shit.
No. No, it does feel like Emma is the one who is given the least character development.
Yeah.
And the least consideration to how this impacts her life. In a way, because Ricky for the first season doesn't have an outside of the 3 of them story. Well, she dates Zayn, but she doesn't have a family until the middle of season 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree in that Emma's family... Emma is a stereotypical middle class. They're a stereotypical middle class family, down to the 1 girl, 1 boy. Both parents have decent jobs. I think it maybe just comes down to the fact that Cleo is the main character. Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't think I was going to talk this much about Emma, but you really feel her loss when you watch the 3rd season, because for all her kind of uptight organisation and annoyingness, and we can't not follow that rule, and am I predictable, Byron? God, Byron just is forgotten.
Oh yeah, no, I was going to bring it up when we talked about Ash, but what the hell happened to Byron? Is he even in season 2?
No, he isn't.
What happened to Byron? As much as he is a nothing character, he's also just a lot of fun in that, he just doesn't care. He just does not care, and it's great. Whenever he pops up, it's hey Byron, what's up? And he's just smiling, and It's great.
He's just a surfer, like, he's just
Yeah.
like, yeah, sure, whatever. You get the feeling that if Emma had ever, like, told him that she was a mermaid, he would have just been like, cool, and then probably would have run off and gone surfing. Like,
Pretty much. Like, he's just living his life and having fun. Good on Byron.
Good on Byron. Him and Miriam actually just go off into the sunset together.
I hope
It was
not.
It was in one of the episodes that I didn't get you to watch. They ran away together.
Oh, that's sad.
So I think that, you know, hashtag Emma deserved better, really. She at least deserved a bit more of a storyline.
Yeah, I think you could say that for both Emma and Ricky in season 2. Ricky, I liked her storyline in season 2. For all that I'm saying, she should have had more. But I liked that they brought up her background and that she was from a lower income background, and that was a thing. I wish they'd expanded on it more. And spent more time with it, because I think that was actually an interesting storyline to explore, the fact that, like, she's not wealthy and that made her feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I like that. Whereas, like, it's also quite a nice thing that it wasn't a storyline, I guess. That, like, in the end, it was fine. They went round to her house and, like, it wasn't a thing for them. And that was nice.
Yeah.
But, no, I liked that about her. What I didn't like about her, particularly in season 2, was the fact that she just never trusted Lewis at all. She was always just like, Lewis is always screwing things up, which is just plain not true.
Yeah. And it's funny because it does feel as though, like, in the first couple of episodes, like, of season 1, you can kind of see a bit of banter between Lewis and Ricky. But, like, as the season goes on, they get along, you know? Like... And then, like, it just seems by season 2, she just, like, hates him for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think it comes down to Emma and Ricky going into the background as well, where, like, Cleo is the one actually making the decisions. Ricky is just there to say, oh, Lewis is just going to screw it up.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I don't know. Everyone's lack of trust in Lewis annoys me.
Yeah, it does
Mostly
feel,
Ricky's,
like,
but,
unnecessary.
Like, yeah, it does. I don't know. He's a boy, though, isn't he? That's the thing. He's a boy.
Well, not only is he a boy, but he's part of the science world. Like, he's constantly, like, poking questions when he should just be, quote unquote, like, accepting the flow, you know? Like, they all have a very, like, this is what happens to us, it's magic, we can't really explain it. And I think that his constant search for answers means, like, there's a kind of distrust in him, in the sense of, like, oh, well, your questioning is going to get us in trouble. Like...
Yeah, I think there is part of that.
So in your opinion, why does Lewis constantly need to find answers?
I don't think you're going to like my answer to this question. Because we need to drive the plot forward.
Go for it.
Because we need to drive the plot forward.
Oh, right. Because we need to drive the plot forward.
Yeah. Like...
Oh, have a little bit more creativity than that.
Yeah, okay. So if I'm pretending that this is, like, true story, this is not a TV show, I think it's natural to want to find answers to things you don't understand. I think that's a natural human thing. I think it's, if anything, surprising that the girls don't. Because I think you can ask the question, because why does it matter to Lewis? Because it's not happening to him. So why does it matter to him? I think that's interesting. But I think it generally just comes down to people always want to know why. And you can't always know why. And Lewis kind of half accepts that in the end, I think. Or he does at the end of season 1 and then maybe forgets that in season 2. But that's his story arc in season 1, isn't it?
I think that my personal answer is that when Cleo is in such a state at the beginning, he kind of makes it his mission to have answers, to kind of make the Three Girls life easier. Like, it's kind of his attempt to help them in a way.
Yes.
Like,
I think that's his initial motivation, yeah. It's Cleo.
Yeah. And then he just becomes interested by it.
Yeah, because as he always wants to point out, he's a scientist, and that's what they do, scientists. But, you know. Yeah, that's one of those things that is kind of, in season 1, was almost like, Lewis, you're not good at science. Why are we pretending you're really good at science? You're like, 15? And then in season 2, he just suddenly does become actually good at science. But, you know. Complete side note here. Did you know there's a spin-off show as well?
Oh, don't talk to me about a spin-off show.
Okay. I won't.
That spin-off show, I think I saw the first episode when it first came out. Yeah. And from what I can tell, is like entirely different mermaids who are just mermaids living on Mako Island. It doesn't make any sense at all, and completely goes against like the world's laws. Like, which I'm going to say in quotation mark about a Nickelodeon show, but like there are rules.
Yeah.
And it just kind of flips on his head.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting you to say you loved it or anything. I don't expect that it is as good.
Anyway, one of those shows was, this links in quite nicely into what I've come to understand is that part of the H2O law, I'm gonna say,
sure,
is this whole idea that the girls were fated to become mermaids.
Right.
Because evidence number 1 is that they are pretty much the same girls as the previous generation.
Uh-huh.
That there are 3 powers to be delved out, and there's 3 girls, and that it matches with their personality. Yeah. And that the pilot kind of creates this whole, like, by coincidence, they all happen to end up there.
Yeah.
And it happened to be a full moon, and all of this. And that Charlotte goes against fate when she becomes a mermaid. That she believes, like, she has this one line where she says that the 3 girls are jealous of her because they became mermaids by accident when she was destined to be a mermaid because her grandmother was a mermaid. Yeah. Which is fundamentally wrong because the 3 girls were meant to become mermaids because it happened by accident.
Yep.
While she intervened by doing it on her own and on purpose, and that the 3 powers weren't meant to be in one person. And I think that like, I don't know, I quite like that whole like contrast between things happening by fate / things happening by accident. Sorry, side note, the 2 of us had a discussion before this podcast started about locus of control and how my locus control is very low. And, like, it's tied in nicely into this conversation about how I like storylines about fate.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, but I quite like the storyline of, like, there's a certain way that magic works and it links with fate and destiny and things just accidentally happening.
Yeah.
And then somebody who really tries to force it. There is like a big part of Charlotte's character is her wanting to be with Lewis, but like there's also a significant part of her storyline that's just like she just wants to control everything. Yeah,
that's the part that I'm less interested in and that annoys me. Okay, so first I think with regards to it being about the girls who are fated to get the powers, and Charlotte messed with that, and that's why it didn't work for her, kind of thing. I think I like half agree with you there. I think you can certainly read that into season 2. I think it's on the basis of season 1 alone. I think that is the story of season 1 in a way, that it was meant to be, that it was them 3. That was just destiny. I think that's Lewis's storyline in season 1, is just coming to terms with the fact that sometimes there isn't an answer and it's just meant to be. I think that works for season 1. I think for season 2, I think you can read that into it. I think as someone who isn't so believing in fate, I think season 2 has issues because Charlotte is able to gain powers. Because as much as you could argue, oh, she hasn't taken it away again because she wasn't meant to have them. And so fate played it out that way because she wasn't meant to have them, so she lost them. I don't like that anyone else gained powers. I wish that it had to be that night that they would gain powers and no one else can gain powers from it. Because otherwise, like, I don't know, I just think there would be too many people going there and getting mermaid powers. And I don't like that. I wish it were the one night.
It was a really good thing that Denman never found out that it was something that could occur every month. Because she at the end of season 1, she totally had the impression that it was a one-time thing and that the powers were just gone. And if she had even gotten an indication that she could have like chucked in her security guard at like any full moon and he would have become a mermaid, she would have been rolling in money.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. I think in season 1, it was just a one-time event.
Do you know, I've got nothing to contradict that. Like,
yeah. And then in season 2, it was any full moon if you're in the moon pool.
I can't disagree with you. Like...
Yeah. I think it's another way that season 1 was a nice, complete story. And I think they'd finished it. And so season 2 has its good moments. But I think it suffers from the fact that they'd only really planned for one season.
I think season 2 is stronger. I think
really?
I think the acting's a bit better. I think that the story's a bit more focused.
I'll give you that, but I think that's a negative. Because I think this plays to maybe us liking different things about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe it comes down to as well, I'm watching this as an adult. And season 2, I will give you, is more focused and has more of a series arc. But I think in having more of a series arc, it's more like an adult show. I think it tries to be a bit more grown up in season 2. And I think that plays against it for me. Because it doesn't do that as well. Whereas I think in season 1, it does what it's trying to do better.
Yeah. I think the show does gradually try to make itself more grown up.
Right.
And I think that one thing I noticed that Nickelodeon got, or what it did around that era, was it started advertising its own shows. And when it was advertising its own shows, it would show really dramatic moments from like the next episode coming up.
Right.
And dramatic like scenes that would make you go as a kid like, oh my god, I have to see that. I know that Ricky hitting her head was one of them. I know that a good couple of Charlotte moments was one of them.
Sure.
Charlotte using her powers. And so yeah, they kind of banked a lot on like big moments that were going to draw in the audience.
Yeah.
I'll show you later on I'll show you a scene that was used as advertisement for the 3rd season.
Right.
And like really as a kid made you go like, what the hell is going on?
Right, okay.
Is there anything that we haven't discussed?
So something I think is a kind of issue with the show, personally, is the antagonists.
Okay.
And specifically, if we're talking about, not talking about Zane, because Zane is an antagonist, but he's also
a love interest.
Yeah, okay, so maybe touching on Zane briefly. Zane is the antagonist that's dealt with best because he, as I've said before, I think is probably the most nuanced character in the show, because he has actually a journey from just a douche to having his life saved by the mermaid and having that become his focus, and that kind of makes him a better person. Weirdly.
Yeah.
Because maybe it's a thing that he's a spoiled rich boy and he's probably always got what he wanted, and this is something he doesn't have. He doesn't have the answers. He doesn't know why this happened. He doesn't know what the mermaid was, how he was saved. And maybe it's that makes him a better character, that he finally has something to do that's not just be a douche.
I think there's part of him that he's always been the person, like the central like focus, in the sense of like everybody has always loved him.
Yeah.
And as soon as he starts saying something that happened to him and people are like, you're being an idiot, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
He suddenly feels in a very vulnerable position.
Yeah.
And I think that when he, at the end of season 1, when he finally gets his answers and then he realises that he's essentially indirectly betrayed Ricky and to a certain extent Emma and Cleo, he suddenly realises that his want to feel validated has come at the cost of other people's lives. And I also wonder, although it's not brought up during the second season from memory, by season, like one of the main parts of Zane's character in season 1 was his relationship with his father.
Mm-hmm.
And like very, I'm sure that there's a TV trope about sad rich boy whose father is uninterested in him.
Sure. It's not uncommon a storyline.
No. But once his father makes the decision to stand by him at the end of the season, I don't think like the father's seen again, but there's that underlying sense that Zane is a lot more of a stable place, that you can assume that he's now got a good relationship with his father, that he gets validation elsewhere and doesn't need to be a douche and doesn't need to bully people in order to feel validated, really.
Yeah, and you could also argue that he gets that validation from Ricky, from having someone he's close to and who likes him for him, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Plus, go on.
Yeah, no, you go.
Plus, I always really like it when him and Lewis work together. Like, it happens rarely, but when it does, I'm like, yeah. Which brings me, Ash is just such an anomaly. Like, he's just such a weird character.
Yeah, no, I've written down that he is a second season character.
Yeah.
He's brought in because Emma needs a love interest, because Byron's pissed off somewhere. And so we're going to give Emma a love interest. And what do we do with him? I don't really know, because we don't want to make him part of the main story. So he's just going to be there. We can pretty much copy Zane's storyline of just like wanting to understand it. And then she tells him, why she tells him, I have no idea. He has not proven himself trustworthy in the slightest.
No.
He bloody tried to carry her into the water when she said she was afraid of water.
Yep.
Like, I don't understand Ash.
Ash is like, what I love about Ash, I love to laugh about Ash because he comes in so randomly
Right.
And he's so headstrong in the sense of he's immediately like, I demand to know the answers.
Yeah.
Like, there's just no subtlety about him.
Yeah.
And then, like, almost the penultimate end of the season is him finding out. And you get, like, one moment where he, like, reacts. And then he's like, cool. Actually, no, rewind a bit. I love the scene where after having not really spent any time with him for a couple of episodes, Charlotte, like, lifts them all up.
Yeah.
And he comes out and he's like, what is going on? And I love the idea that from his perspective, he's like, what?
Yeah, what has he actually seen there? Has he just seen them falling from the sky? Because, like, I want more answers.
And, like, the scene has to cut there because he says, what is going on? And they all look worried. And the scene cuts and jumps to, like, this evening. And it's one of those scenes where I'm like, what did you actually answer? Like,
there is no answer to that.
And then he's just sat on the rock as, like, I love that final, I always laugh at that final scene of season 2 when the 3 girls are like, hey, let's take all of our boyfriends who don't get along with each other, sit them down on a rock, and we'll just, like, get into our bikinis and they can watch us run into the sea and go for a swim.
Okay, so this is also the moment to bring up the fact, why do they change into their bikinis? Why, when they go to the beach to run into the water together, do they change into the bikinis? They don't have to. Their clothes aren't wet when they change back. So why do they change into their bikinis? It makes no sense.
Maybe it's so that when they get out, because one thing that the show never shows, but, like, has to happen each time, is them... Because, like, if you imagine the sea, like, it's shallow water first. So they must have to claw their way onto the beach. And then Ricky must have to like, get to a point, like, if you think how wet sand is close to the shore, they must have to get to the dry part of the beach. Ricky then dries them. And, like, they have to do all of that without being seen.
Yeah,
so...
it's something that never occurred to me, and I think you're right, is never meant to occur to you.
No. And so I wonder if the bikinis are part of the whole, like, oh, we were just lying here getting a tan. Like, or
well,
maybe...
yeah, but then once they're dry, they're fine.
Yeah.
Because they're mermaids up until the point where they're dry, and then they're fine. So they can just be in their normal clothes. I liked the attempt, but I don't think you got it quite.
No. Maybe it's a part of the whole, like, oh, we're going off to the beach. Like, maybe their parents are like... Maybe, like, during the first season, their parents were like, where are you going? And they'd be like, to the beach.
But they go to the beach in their normal clothes and then change into their bikinis. And also, like, it's not like you could say that, like, the bikinis is their excuse. Because what about when they go home and their bikinis are completely dry?
Oh, love, do you want me to put your bathing suit into the wash for you since you went to the beach today? No, it's bone dry.
It's perfectly dry. Doesn't even really have sand on it. Like...
But yeah, I love to imagine, like, 5 seconds after that penultimate scene where the 3 of them have dived into the water and Zane, Lewis and Ash all look to each other and just go, now what? Like, do we wait for them? Do we go and have lunch? Like, oh, it tickles me.
Yeah. Anyway, I was going to bring up about about Dr. Denman and Charlotte, and then we got sidetracked. Anyway, the point I was going to make was, I think that they both are interesting characters until they just become psychopaths. Because I think with Dr. Denman, initially, she has the makings of a more interesting character in that she wants the answers because she's a scientist.
Yeah.
Similarly to Lewis.
Yeah.
That, like, this is an incredible scientific discovery and she wants answers as to what's going on. And I think that's interesting because that makes her not just evil, it makes her just curious, and understandably so. I think that's more interesting. But then when she's brought back, it suddenly becomes about the money, which makes her kind of, oh, okay, she's just evil. If it's just about the money, she's evil. But if it's about science, it's more interesting than that, and it's more nuanced. And so it annoys me that they make it about the money.
Yeah, there was a line I'd never caught on to before when Lewis mentions that she'd done her PhD by 21. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, what? Like, this woman's amazing. Like,
yeah, just a bit, Jesus.
I
think that's the kind of the line you don't realise what that means when you're younger.
No, but suddenly 2 24-year-olds are like, what? And I think, yeah, I agree that she starts off as quite interesting. I think that, I don't know if I agree that, like, it's much more to do with money in the later season. I think that money becomes the central dialogue for her convincing Zane's father to kind of keep in his funds. Well, she does say, like, this is business and those girls are worth a fortune.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose.
Exactly.
Motivated by science. She's someone who clearly makes a lot of money in what she does. Actually, I have a lot of respect for her. You know, she's clearly quite young. She's in a male-dominated field. She's done exceptionally well, and she's found something that nobody else in the world has found. Yeah. Like, I'd be pretty cold-cut about it.
Oh, yeah. Like I say, if it weren't for the money side of it, if it weren't for that motivation, I think it's an interesting villain. I think she's still an antagonist because, obviously, if she finds out about the girls, it's big trouble for them. But it's more interesting because she's not just evil then.
Yeah.
But they don't do that.
But then I wonder if part of her kind of arc, and I say with quotation marks, but, like, if part of her arc is that when she was just doing it for science, there was almost a kind of there was a curiosity, but there was also it's Lewis's DNA, you know, I kind of have to let it go. Like, when she comes back again and she hasn't stumbled upon the other scale, she kind of asks him about it, and he's like, oh, well, I don't have it anymore. And she's like, that's a shame. But as soon as she kind of realizes what a big thing it is, and she starts thinking about the money, she then loses all of her integrity. Like, she then kind of becomes a bit obsessed with it. And then when the girls then lose their powers in front of her, it's like, oh, well, you know, if I'd perhaps, I don't know, I wonder if there's, because the girls are so, like, suspicious of everybody, but there might have been an alternative thing where, like, you know, an amazing marine biologist who kind of they're able to ask questions to, and she's able to, like kind of like Lewis does. Like, Lewis is constantly, like, testing things on them, and seeing, like, the boundaries of their powers and things like that. Like, if she had just stuck to the science, they could have had a reasonable relationship. I think part of her antagonism is the money, is the fact that she forgets about science and she makes it about money.
Yeah, I think it's generous to credit the show with making any sort of transition from one thing to the other there. I think it is just a flip, that in one moment she's caring about the science and the next moment it's all about the money. But I kind of agree with you that it might have actually been an interesting way to take it if it were all about the science and she were an antagonist in that way, and then she found out about them, and actually we learn that she's not evil, and so she's not going to expose them or anything, but she wants to keep studying.
Yeah.
And she wants to find out about it. I think that would have been a much more interesting way to take it. And then you could play on that in season 2.
Yeah.
And you could find out more about it scientifically by an actual scientist. And that might have been an interesting way to take it. But, you know, instead, this is what I mean. Like, I'm disappointed that they went kind of the easy route of just making her, like, stereotypical evil.
Yeah.
Which, I'd say the same about Charlotte. Because I think her storyline would have been much more interesting if she were just a perfectly normal girl, for the most part, who liked Lewis and who wanted to discover more about her grandmother, and who was just curious because she goes into the girl's room, to Cleo's room, I think, and sees that they've got all this stuff and they've got like a photo of her grandmother and stuff, and so you would be curious.
Yeah.
And then, in the photo she has a locket on, which is the same as Cleo, Ricky and Emma have. Like, you would be curious. Again, she could be an antagonist because they could be worried about her finding out about it without her having to go all evil about it. I don't know. I don't like that they gave her powers. I think that also kind of broke the rules of the world, like I've said. Like, it seems like in season 1, it was that one night that they got their powers, and then she gets the powers and it kind of ruins it for me. I don't know. Basically, I think they dropped the ball with the endings of both seasons. I think they could have made them more interesting, and they went the easy route.
I know that the season finales were exciting enough for me as a kid.
Yeah, and that's what matters.
Yeah, I like in terms of my perspective on this, it was like, for the time it came out, when it was aimed at my age range, like, I just gobbled that up, you know? Like,
yeah, that's fair.
Like,
that's fair.
It clearly just worked for me. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think this is partly watching a children's show as an adult and wanting that nuance that children's shows don't have for the most part, and arguably don't need. Would.
Go on.
No, you go.
What's interesting, I've been thinking this as, like, rewatching this, is that children's books, and not only children's books, but animated shows don't seem to have this same problem. For instance, one that I would like to discuss at some point is Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
And that is unanimously agreed that the characters and themes in that is quite nuanced.
Yeah.
Same with, I'm trying to think of some other animated TV shows. The first one that comes to mind is the original Teen Titans, not Teen Titans Go.
Right.
And, you know, a couple of other shows that really still hold up today. And, like, it's quite popular, you know, of people of my, like, of our age to have watched things like Adventure Time. Or, like, others of that sort.
Or even, like, we talked the other day about how you can watch some, like, young children's shows, like Peppa Pig.
Yeah.
As an adult, and you can get enjoyment out of that because there is more to it than just the surface level as well. And so there's ways to add depth to these shows as well. In other ways. I don't know. I think sometimes I say sometimes I see as if I'm always watching children's shows and thinking this, but like, watching this, it feels like you've dumbed it down and you didn't need to.
Yeah.
Because it works fine for kids when it's dumbed down, but I don't think you needed to. And I think I can't help but feel that it would have a greater impact on kids if it were more nuanced. If you could have a basic reading of it, which is entertaining for kids, and then you could have more underneath that. For example, Zayn. I think Zayn is a generally decent character with nuance.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think, and it's why I picked, like I said at the beginning, it's why I picked H2O over the other shows, because I do think that there's actually some potential in this show.
Yeah.
Like, there are kind of glimmers of like, well, actually, if the decision had been made to not dumb it down, it could have been a halfway, like, decent show.
I mean, it is a halfway decent show. It's still a decent show.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm now defending it, apparently. But, no, it is a decent show. It's just, it could have been better.
Yes. So with that thought, how does it hold up?
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a question for me to ask you, because this is the first time I've watched it, and like I've said before, I can't properly judge the show based on... Basically, I didn't watch it at the age when I should have been watching it. I've only watched it now, whereas you've watched it at both, and you picked it because it was a show that you enjoyed as a kid, that mattered to you as a kid. So I'll just throw it straight back at you. How does it hold up?
I think it holds up better than a lot of TV shows of its time and of the same demographic. Right. And like I said at the beginning, I think it holds up better because it's got that overarching story.
Yeah.
I think where it really doesn't hold up is things like the acting, and some of the more, like, once you push on to some of the concepts, you are met with questions like, where did Ash come from, and why do they wear bikinis to the beach?
Yeah.
I think that part of the issue with it, and part of the issues with shows like that, is that they were made to be consumed at the time, and they weren't made to be rewatched. Like,
yeah.
I think that the idea between, like, Disney and Nickelodeon was like, this year we'll have Hannah Montana, Wizards, and H2O and Zoe 101. And then once those are finished, or once the ratings have gone down on them, we'll replace it with Victorious, and we'll replace it with Sunny with a Chance, and then we'll replace it with Anthem. Like, they're not meant to be, like... Yeah. Yeah, they're just meant to be consumed at the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, then we'll take the secondary character from this one and make them a main character in a different show.
Yeah,
which is something that they always love to do.
Yeah. You know, once the ratings have fallen on Drake and Josh, we'll then make iCarly. They're just kind of made to be, like, not really thought about. So I think that with that perspective, the show actually holds up quite well. But it wasn't made to be analysed by a podcast 20 years after it... Not 20 years, but like 15 years after it came out.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. By the way, I've just thought of possibly the best example of an animated kids show with more nuance to it, being SpongeBob.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing. It's an internet thing. That, like, adults, like, memes of SpongeBob is a massive thing, because you can watch SpongeBob as an adult and it's funny.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I have laughed at SpongeBob quite a bit.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
Like, I wouldn't say it's nuanced.
Okay, so maybe nuance is the wrong way to put it, but intelligent.
Yes. It's got intelligent humour.
Yeah, a show can be intelligent so that it's enjoyable for kids, but it's also it can be enjoyed by adults because it's just clever.
Yeah.
Sorry, it just occurred to me.
That's okay. So, how are you going to rate this?
I don't know. How do you rate this? Do you rate it in terms of how good a children's show it is or how good a show it is?
How do you rate a show like H2O? Please cut that out.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, I think ultimately I have to go like somewhere down the middle of those two things. I don't know. I'm feeling like 6.57, maybe. Maybe leaning more on 6.5.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 7.
Yeah.
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 I think it's... We've not rated anything. I don't know what I'm going to have to listen back and try to discover what our lowest rating was.
Oh, this is the lowest.
Yeah, it's got to be,
It's definitely the lowest. Yeah. Yeah, because like you said before, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, everything else we have talked about are things that we like now still. Whether we're nostalgic about them or not, like we still like them now. Whereas this is a thing that is not for us now.
No.
And yeah, I'm sure if we watch the kids' shows from now, we'd rate them lower than this.
Yeah.
Not the animated ones, at least.
Not the animated ones. Avatar will be soon. As soon as you can sit down and watch 3 seasons.
Well, yeah. You say soon. You say soon. But, you know, maybe because we're ahead of schedule on these, and it depends if we change our schedule in how often we release these, which we might, but we'll see. It will come at some point.
Wait, is that it?
I think that's it. I think that was a good one.
Yeah?
That was good. Yeah, I think that was good, don't you?
Yeah.
You're still recording, right? You're still recording, please.
I'm still recording.
Good. Okay.
How come?
I've still got to do the credits.
Okay.
Thank you for listening. The music at the beginning and end of the podcast is Cheer Up by Keys of Moon, and the additional effects are from zapstat.com. If you want to get in contact with us, you can do so at our website, nostalgiasperspective.co.uk, email us at nostalgiasperspective@gmail.com, or if you're listening on YouTube, leave us a comment down below. And next week, we're going to be watching a TV show of my choice, which will be HBO's Looking, starring Jonathan Groff. And so, join us then.
Really? Jonathan Groff is in, like, King George from Hamilton? And
yeah, and Kristoff from Frozen. Yeah.
And Jessie from Glee. Love him.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah. Looking forward to watching it now.
You're dreading it before. Nah, be good.